Welcome to Monster Territory, ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by Fox One. How you doing, everybody? Hope everyone had a great weekend. It is Monday night at the time of this recording. Going to hold off on the live shows for now. I feel like people are still watching all of the postseason action. We got the Dodgers and the Brewers on as we speak. And the Mariners, man, oh man, they went to town against the Blue Jays earlier. They have a commanding 2-0 lead in the ALCS. I'll tell you, I thought the Mariners, they were going to be wounded coming out of that division round. That extra inning win against the Tigers there. Man, oh man, what a game that was. But here are the Mariners up 2-0. Man, oh man. I thought the Blue Jays were going to be in a lot better shape. But here we are, 2 wins away from the World Series. Can you believe it? But we got some Red Sox to talk about in this episode today. We're going to be talking about a couple of things on the news front. Pete Alonso, could he be looking for 7 years? You know Scott Boras, he's up to his old tricks. We'll talk about it. Pete Alonso, I don't know, 7 years might be a little too much. I'll give you my thoughts. Coaching staff, we did have an announcement on the coaching staff. One minor change, that was it, but a lot of people questioning one of the coaches there, why there wasn't a change. I'll get into that in just a little bit. And then we got some offseason predictions for the Red Sox from ESPN. ESPN, they're always putting out some interesting things. If it's not Jeff Passan, there's always some interesting takes coming from ESPN. I'll react to those. I'll give you my thoughts on those by the end of the show here. But everyone, if you can, hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new. We're trying to get to 6K by opening day. I think we can do it. But let's get to it here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to it. And let's start off with Pete Alonso here. Pete Alonso. So we got a little bit of news this past weekend that he could be looking for 7 years. I'm going to say right off the bat, Scott Boras, he's up to his old tricks again. I smell leverage, ladies and gentlemen. This is what Scott Boras does every single offseason. We saw it with Alex Bregman last offseason, looking for multi-year deals. That's how it always is with Scott Boras clients. He's looking for all the money. He's looking for all the years. He's looking for a yacht. He's looking for silk pajamas on top of that yacht with some fancy, I don't know, whatever else. He's looking for everything, Mr. Scott Boras is. And this is no different, right? Go back to JD Martinez in 2018. That offseason, he was looking for 7 years, over $200 million. People are like, wow. JD Martinez, very good hitter. But man, oh man, that's a lot for a guy that's pretty much going to be a DH. And what did JD Martinez end up getting? Well, he ended up getting a 5-year, $110 million deal. You go back to last offseason, Alex Bregman, looking for multi-years, ends up settling for the short-term deal, high AAV. We've seen it time and time again when it comes to Scott Boras clients, and I don't think this is going to be any different. Here's the thing with Pete Alonso. Now, some of you might be asking, well, why couldn't Pete Alonso, get himself a 7-year deal? Especially, with the run production that he's been able to bring to the table, the power that he's been able to bring. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to first baseman, especially ones that are going into their 30s, power hitting first basemen, they tend to wear down a little quicker than other players out there. Pete Alonso, big guy. He's the polar bear, right? And they just tend to have that track record tied to him, right? And you take a look at some of the bigger first baseman contracts over the years. Yes, I know Vlad, he just got a massive contract from the Blue Jays before the start of this season. And but that's different, right? That was an extension, homegrown player. They wanted to keep him around for life. And, still young. It's a little different circumstances there, right? But when it comes to free agents, you have not really seen those 8-year, 9-year, 10-year deals for a lot of those first basemen on the market. Yes, you have seen them, right? You go back to Albert Pujols, that massive contract that he got from the Angels. Prince Fielder got that big old contract, but look at how those contracts ended up turning out. Not very good, all right? Now, Freddie Freeman, he got himself a 6-year deal with the Dodgers, right? Paul Goldschmidt, he got an extension. He was getting close to free agency, but they worked out a 5-year deal. So I think that's what you're going to end up seeing with Alonso. I think it's going to end up being probably around 5 or 6 years. That is my prediction, just based off of the track record. Now, with Alonso, how much is it going to cost to get this guy? Well, there's a couple of factors that come into play, right? When it comes to thinking of what a contract could look like, right? We already went over the years, but what could the dollar amount be? right? Well, if you take a look at Pete Alonso here, this past season, hit 272, 347 on base, a 524 on the slugging, a 141 WRC plus. Very good numbers overall. A 3.6 wins above replacement. Now, that would have been a lot higher if he was somewhat good defensively. But Pete Alonso, one of the worst defensive first basemen out there. Now, first base doesn't necessarily have a high fielding value when it comes to the positions out there, right? But still, you would like your first baseman to still play good defense, right? Or still play good defense. You look at Freddie Freeman. You look at Matt Olson. Those guys are very good over there at first base, right? So Pete Alonso, when it comes to wins above replacement, over the last 4 years, he's averaged right around a 3 WAR, all right? And in today's game, the average cost per win, according to Fangraphs, you're looking at right around $9 million per win above replacement. So Alonso, he's been averaging right around a 3 wins above replacement over the last 4 years. I think it's safe to say, he's going to be turning 31 years old here. I think he still has a few very good seasons left in the tank. I think you could say he could be a 3 WAR average over the next 3 seasons, right? So if you do the math, again, it's on average $9 million per win. It's gonna vary from organization to organization, but on average, right, 3 WAR times $9 million, you're looking at around $27 million per year. But then you got to factor in the regression on the back half of the deal. Let's say that WAR drops down, maybe anywhere from 2 to a 2.5. You're looking at around $23 million per year. Add all that up together, you're looking at $148.5 million over a 6-year deal, right? Add in a bit more, when it comes to the bidding, the market, right? Maybe say 10%. Right, I'm sure Alonso's going to have some bidders out there, and Scott Boras, you know what he does every offseason. He's going to hold out until the very last moment, right? And so maybe add 10% on that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Alonso ends up getting anywhere from 150, 160, maybe 170, but I highly doubt he's going to get higher than 170. I think somewhere 150 to 160, that sounds about right. And I think with Alonso as well, you got to think, last offseason did not go his way. And I think if they get an offer, if he sees something on the table where he's like, okay, you know what? I think that sounds pretty good. Let's not try to push this. Let's take that, right? So I think if he sees something that he thinks is fair, and especially after our last offseason went, I think you'll see him sign, right? I mean, he's obviously not Juan Soto by any means, but Juan Soto, Scott Boras' client, he didn't hold out the entire offseason, right? They got that done pretty quick. So I think Alonso, that's what I think he's going to end up getting. I'd say 150 to 160. I think that's fair. 6-year deal, let's say max. I think if it's a 5-year deal, I think you could see anywhere from like 130 to 150. That's what I'm thinking for Mr. Pete Alonso. Now, should the Red Sox spend that kind of money? Well, I've talked about this with Pete Alonso. I think it'd be a great fit. The power bat, right-handed bat at Fenway Park, it makes a ton of sense. He's hit very well at Fenway Park in his career. He does very well with runners in scoring position. Even if you sign Pete Alonso and still hang on to Nate Lowe, you could still make that work for this coming year, right? They could share time between first base, DH. Nate Lowe, he can play mostly against the righties. You can bring in a right-handed bat as your DH, right, against left-handed pitching. And Alonso, he can split time between first and DH. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring in Pete Alonso. We'll see, though. We'll see. But I see the Red Sox being aggressive. That's going to tie into what we're going to talk about, the ESPN predictions by the end of the show. But yeah, Pete Alonso, I think, makes all the sense in the world for the Red Sox. We'll see how it ends up going, though. I think a lot of teams are going to be in the mix. I wouldn't be surprised. Obviously the Mets, I think they're going to want to keep him around. I wouldn't even be surprised at all if you see a team, maybe even, it's a small market team, but like the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, I think Alonso would mash in Cincinnati. If there was ever a time for the Reds to maybe splurge, I wonder if this could be a moment, right, where they need power in that lineup. And I don't know, will the Reds outbid a team like the Red Sox to get it done? I don't know. You got to look out for the Yankees. Could the Yankees be in play, right? They got a few guys becoming free agents. Could you see something like that possibly? I think so. I think there's going to be teams in the mix when it comes to Pete Alonso. I think there's going to be a decent market for him. I think the Red Sox make a ton of sense. So let's move on here. We have a bit of news when it comes to the coaching staff. And, we were all kind of wondering about this. What's the Red Sox coaching staff going to look like after a successful season? And, now that you're firmly in a competitive window, people are wondering, man, what's going to happen with Kyle Hudson as a third base coach? He had a few issues this past year. Well, Kyle Hudson, he's staying in the fold. And there was only one coaching change for 2026. And that is assistant hitting coach Ben Rosenthal. He will not be coming back. I don't know. I'm not sure what the reasoning is for that. A lot of people also were mentioning Peter Fatsi. Should he come back? Remember the Red Sox offense? They were very up and down in the beginning of 2025. They ended up getting their act together. Roman Anthony obviously helped out a lot of things. But the Red Sox, with Roman Anthony in the fold, they had a top 10 offense. They ranked top 10 in WRC Plus when Roman Anthony was in that lineup. So Fatsi, I know there was a lot of inconsistencies there in the beginning. Let's see how they end up doing for 2026. Fatsi's he's been there for a while now, and obviously they did produce again when Roman was healthy. But as for Kyle Hudson, there were a couple of little blunders that, especially one of the postseason that we saw, that a lot of people were thinking, what is going on here with Kyle Hudson as the third base coach? Well, you go back to the postseason, right? Game 2 against the Yankees. Nate Eaton not being sent home. He was rounding third, looking like, okay, that could have been it would have been a close play at the plate. And, Jazz Chisholm, there was a ground ball from Massa, ended up bobbling it. He made an off-balance throw. Ben Rice ended up dropping the ball. Hindsight, yeah, Nate Eaton would have scored. But let's say that the Yankees, let's say Ben Rice ended up catching it, right? Ended up being a clean play from him. But because, and again, it was a bang-bang play, but Jazz was off-balance there. I just feel like personally that would have been a moment to send Eaton home, because the guy's got speed, uber athletic. I think it would have made a lot of sense, but he ended up holding him there. In a big-time moment like that in the postseason, I felt like that was the time to be aggressive, but Hudson ended up holding him. And a lot of Red Sox fans were unhappy about that. You go back to a couple of moments during the season. There was that one game against the Orioles. I believe it was extra innings. Kind of the same thing. Ended up holding Eaton to third base. And, people were wondering, like, oh, what's going on here? I don't know. Maybe they get a little bit more aggressive for next year. But here's the thing. This is why Kyle Hudson is back in the fold. The Red Sox were fourth in base running this year when it came to base running runs above average. They were fourth overall in all of Major League Baseball this year. So, yes, I know. When you're putting things under a microscope, when you see, a few glaring plays that ended up working against you, you're going to think about those, right? Especially in a big-time moment in the postseason. But when you're looking at the whole picture, the Red Sox were a good base running team. Yes, they had some guys with speed that definitely helped things out. That doesn't fully represent the base running coach or the base coaches, obviously. But for the most part, they were a good base running team. And I think when you look at the larger sample size, Hudson probably, he did better than you would think, right? And obviously, they just had those couple of glaring plays that really stood out. I think in the end, going to 2026, this past year will be a learning experience, right? And I think you'll see more often than not where, they'll get aggressive, right? And they'll send some runners home, right? That's what I think. That's what I think the reasoning is, really. The Red Sox this year, there were a lot of positives with this Red Sox team. We've already talked about the 2025 Red Sox ad nauseum at this point. We're moving on here, but there were a lot of good things. In the end, a lack of a number 2 in the rotation. Injuries did not help out this team at all. Key injuries as well to big-time players like Roman, right? Marcelo Meyer also going down. That didn't help. So, I don't think the coaching staff was necessarily, I think when you're looking for scapegoats, And when you have those big glaring moments like that, especially on the big stage, yeah, it's going to be easy to point fingers. I get it. Kyle Hudson, he did make a couple of bad moves, right? But let's see if they can adjust in 2026. Also, Jason Varitek, his contract is up as well. We'll see. There is no announcement on that yet. I would imagine he's still going to be around. He's going to be with the Red Sox for life. So I'm not worried about that whatsoever. I think Varitek will be back. It's just a matter of, at least in my opinion, it's more when instead of if, right? We're going to get to the ESPN article here in just a second. We do have to talk about tonight's sponsor. We have a couple of sponsors here for tonight. Let's talk about it. All right, so we are brought to you tonight by Fox One. Now, Fox One is now live. You can stream all of your Fox favorites together in one place, including all of the playoffs. You got the American League playoffs and the World Series, right? You got the National League going on here as well. We just talked about it earlier. The Mariners going to town here on the Blue Jays. They win with a final of 10-3 here today to take a 2-0 series lead. That's pretty crazy, man. They're going back to Seattle. I mean, they play so well in Seattle. That pitching staff, I mean, the Mariners are in really good shape here. The fact that they went to Toronto and they took 2, this is going to be tough here. The Blue Jays, they had a ton of momentum going into that series. We'll see what ends up happening, but you can catch that on Fox One. And as I'm recording this, the Dodgers have a 1-0 lead in the top of the 9th. Their pitching has been amazing here tonight. Bases loaded as of right now. They're looking to add some insurance. But then we got the World Series going to be coming up next week. You're going to be able to find all of that on Fox One. From the MLB postseason to the NFL on Fox to big noon Saturdays with Fox One, you get it all live. You can start your 7-day free trial today. Offers are subject to change. Go to fox1.com for complete terms and conditions. Fox One, streaming now. Go check it out. Alrighty, let's get to it here. Let's get to it. We got some ESPN predictions to talk about. ESPN, like I said, Jeff Passan. Jeff Passan's the man. We all love Jeff Passan, but when it comes to other opinions from ESPN, it's been a little hit or miss at the very least, right? Passan, he's put out some very good stuff over the years, but we had another one here today. It was actually from multiple contributors, this article on ESPN today. It was offseason questions for eliminated teams. So they talked about the Cubs, the Tigers, right? The Phillies, Yankees. They got the Reds here as well, Guardians, Padres. And you got the Red Sox down here. This is from Schoenfield on ESPN. And so I found some of these to be very interesting. Let's kind of go through this here, right? You list the key free agents, Alex Bregman, who I do think is going to opt out. Lucas Giolito has the mutual option. Rob Refsnyder, Dustin May, Steven Matz. I don't think May, Steven Matz, I don't think they're coming back. Refsnyder, I think it's really just a matter of what he wants to do. I'd be shocked if he ended up going to a different team. I think he's either going to come back to the Red Sox or just retire at this point. But those are the key free agents. And then he has the next section, the biggest offseason priority. And he says re-signing Bregman if he opts out and improving the starting pitching depth. Now, for me personally, I agree. I think Bregman coming back is a priority, but I look at it as a 1A, 1B, 1C kind of a thing. I think they need to get a number 2 for the rotation, and I think they need a middle of the order bat, and I do think the defense needs to be improved in the infield with this team, but I wouldn't necessarily put Bregman ahead of getting a number 2 for the rotation as well as a middle of the order bat. I think they're all kind of clustered together there at the top. Now, when it comes to Bregman, obviously the bat fits at Fenway Park. You saw what he did when he was healthy this year. Man, that bat fit like a glove at Fenway Park. He was great. But what he brought to the table in terms of his leadership, what he brought to the culture, you very much appreciated the entire package that Bregman brought to the Red Sox in 2025. But they absolutely need a number 2 for the rotation. I'm going to keep saying that until I am just blue in the face. I mean, we all know this. You need to get that done. And you need some power behind Alex Bregman in the lineup. But I agree. Re-signing Bregman is definitely a priority, but it's not the only priority. Now, this is where I disagree with this take when it comes to the pitching. Improving the starting pitching depth. Well, no, I don't think the depth needs to be improved at all. like I said, you need someone behind Garrett Crochet. You need someone for the top, right? You see a lot of situations where you see a lot of top-heavy rotations and they lack depth. Well, I think the Red Sox are a bit opposite. But yes, they obviously have a great option at the top with Crochet, but I think they need a little bit more there. They have plenty of depth there, right? You got Bayo. Giolito, if he comes back, right? That's going to be even more depth, but totally early. They flashed some very good things this past year. Don't forget about Cutter Crawford. He should come back at some point next year. Patrick Sandoval should come back at some point next year. Don't forget about Hunter Dobbins, Richard Fitz. Those guys are going to be back at some point in 2026. You got Luis Perales pitching in fall ball right now. There were talks of maybe even Perales joining the Red Sox at the end of the season last year. I mean, that's something. And they're very high on him. He's got an electric arm. He's got good stuff. So the Red Sox, they have depth. Now, like the old saying goes, you can never have too much pitching, but they need someone at the top of the rotation, not necessarily depth. When I think of depth, I think of a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, 7, right? Guys in the AAA that are on the cusp. That's the depth that I think of, right? You need a number 2 like Joe Ryan on the trade market, maybe Sandy Alcantara. I'm looking at guys on the free agent market, Dylan Cease. The Red Sox, they like that swing and miss ability. Will they pay him the kind of money that Boris is going to be looking for? I don't know. I'm not sure about that one, right? But there are definitely going to be options out there, and we'll be talking about that plenty this coming off season. Now, when it comes to a couple other things that he mentioned here, right? When it came to his off-season prediction, he says, I think the Red Sox will play it safe and bring back a similar roster. Well, I don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that whatsoever. Play it safe and bring back a similar roster, starting with re-signing Bregman. He goes on to say they could then slide Meyer to second base. That would still leave 4 outfielders plus Campbell, who started the season with a lot of helium after making the opening day roster, but his defense at second wasn't good, and he didn't rip up AAA after getting sent down. If anyone is the odd man out, it's probably him. So he's the one most likely to get traded. All right, so let's unpack these couple of things here. Let's start off with the playing it safe part. Of course, the Red Sox, they're going to play it safe, I think, in multiple ways, right? I mean, they're not going to blow up the top of their farm system, I don't think, necessarily, to, go land, someone along the lines like Paul Skeens, who I don't think is even going to be available, or Tarek Skubal. He's been the talk of the town here since the Tigers got knocked out. I don't see the Red Sox necessarily doing something like that, but I could see them giving up a couple of prospects for someone like Joe Ryan. I think that's absolutely on the table. Now, could you give up Connolly early or Peyton Tolley? Now, if you gave up one of those guys, I'd say you are pushing the envelope a little bit right there, right? I think they're going to go a little bit more than just playing it safe. We've seen this over the years with the Red Sox, right? When they're going into these competitive windows, they go out there and they make those moves. You go all the way back to 2004, right? When they're on the cusp, they go out and go get a Kurt Schilling, Keith Folk, right? They obviously win in 2004. 2007, right? You're getting all this young talent coming up the pipe, right? Jacoby Ellsbury, Dustin Pedroia, Jonathan Papelbon, looking great. You get all these guys coming up to help that core group. They go out, they go get Dice K, JD Drew, Julio Lugo, big offseason, right? 2010, very good core group. You got some promising young talent. Obviously, 2011 did not work out. They had multiple injuries that year, but they tried to reinforce that roster by going after Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford, landing both those guys, right? Even you go 2013, they still had a good core group, obviously after the nightmare Bobby Valentine season, but they went out there and made multiple moves to reinforce the roster. Yes, they were kind of question marks, guys like Mike Napoli, Shane Victorino, Johnny Gomes, Stephen Drew, right? But they still went out there and they made multiple moves, and look what ended up happening, right? You go back to when they entered that competitive window after 2015, good young talent. Looks like they're ready to take a next step. They go out and get David Price. Next offseason, they go get Chris Sale, JD Martinez. We've seen this time and time again. Now that they're in a competitive window, once again, they have a good core group. They got young talent here. I think you're going to go see them being a bit more aggressive. I don't think they're just going to sit there and play it safe. I mean, when I think play it safe, I think, okay, make a couple of moves. He mentions here, you go get someone like Merrill Kelly. Well, I disagree with that one. I think Merrill Kelly, I think he's going to go back to Arizona, right? This is a guy that he wants to go end his season in Arizona, right? He's an Arizona native. He's getting towards the end of his career. Arizona's in a competitive window. I see that probably happening. So I don't think the Red Sox are just going to go out there and go sign Merrill Kelly and call it a day. That's what I think he's saying here, right? Bring back Bregman and stuff like that. But I think the Red Sox are going to do more than that personally. Again, we've seen this under the John Henry ownership. They've gone out there and made moves when they are in that competitive window. Now that they are in it, I think you're going to see them push the envelope. But everybody watching on NESN, we do have to wrap it up right there. We are out of time. But if you want to come see the rest of the show, coming over to YouTube, Monster Territory, and see what I got to say. But everybody on NESN, I'll talk to you next time. When it comes to the Christian Campbell take, I disagree with that one too. I just don't agree with that. And I think that's more so you're just looking at it from the perspective where, okay, yeah, after the great April that he had, yeah, he kind of fell flat, right? Pitchers figured him out. They realized he couldn't pull the ball. They realized he wasn't, recognizing the off speed, the breaking pitches as well. And they went to town on him, and they figured him out. And that's what good pitchers do in the major leagues, right? They make adjustments. But I think the Red Sox are still high on Christian Campbell very much. I don't see why they would give up on him at this point, especially after they just signed him to a long-term extension. There's a good player there. There's a lot of talent there. And sure, he kind of fell on his face this year, but why would you give up someone like Christian Campbell, who has a lot of promise with the bat, very athletic, has the ability to play multiple positions. He's also a quick learner, and he's also willing to go out there and go do whatever it takes to help the team. I think there's just a lot there where, sure, didn't really work out this year, but you're just going to give up on him after 1 year, after you kind of did rush him through? You try to be a bit aggressive, yeah, he had to go back down to the minors. And even if he ends up staying in the minor leagues next year, has a fresh start, starts at Worcester, and then at some point, maybe he can come back up and help the Red Sox, right? We just saw it this year. Marcelo Meyer going down, Roman Anthony going down. Why would you trade someone like Christian Campbell, who was just one of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball? Sure, there were some adjustments that he had to make this past year, but you go back to the last couple of seasons, right? Very good metrics down to the minors. There's no reason, in my opinion, to give up on Christian Campbell at this point, unless there is a trade that is just way too good to turn down and they want Christian Campbell, right? Of course, that could always happen. But to me, the fact that he can play multiple positions, the fact that he has that versatility, he's still very young, has upside with the bat. You have some injury concerns on the Major League roster. Trevor Story, listen, he had a great year, but who knows? Could Story end up having something else? He made it this year, but could something happen here in 2026? What if he goes down? Marcelo Meyer slides over to shortstop, and then Christian Campbell can take over at second, right? So you have him in the fold, and then, doesn't necessarily mean that's what his future is going to be, just this backup kind of a guy. Story, he is going to be a free agent after a couple of years, right? And if you give Campbell a couple of years, really, try and figure things out, mature more, into this great player that I definitely think he can be. And who knows, maybe he can be that long-term second baseman. Maybe something ends up happening with the outfield this year, right? Jarren Duran, Willie Abreu, they're definitely going to be on the table. But who knows? Maybe something else happens. What if you end up having a situation where maybe both those guys could end up being on the table, and then, or one of them, you trade one of them, and then one of them goes down next year. Campbell can go out there and play some left field. So he has that ability, and I don't think the Red Sox are just going to give that away lightly. I think this is a guy they are very high on still, despite the down year, and I think they're going to hang on to him. So I disagree with this take. I don't think Christian Campbell is going to be traded. I do think he could be the odd man out in the beginning, but I don't think he's going to be the odd man out forever. So just give things time. So I just disagree with that take. We'll get to the last couple of parts here, but we do have one more word from our sponsor tonight. I'll be right back.
KP, we both love Omaha Steaks. My latest order, 6 private reserve filet mignons. It sounds bougie because it is. They were fantastic. And also 1.5 pounds of jumbo cooked shrimp with a big initial discount and then an additional $35 off with the code FOUL. You have been a long time Omaha Steaks guy too.
Yeah, back in college, I would always order steaks. I'd put them in my freezer, and that's the reason I bulked up, is because I always had fresh steaks in my freezer ready to go.
Delicious protein. Get after it, okay? It is the best in the biz. If you're ordering steaks online, you can save big with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their early Black Friday sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code FOUL at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Promo code FOUL at checkout.
Alrighty, let's get to the last part of this prediction article. He says here, if the Red Sox want to spend bigger, Framber Valdez or Shane Bieber makes sense. Now, I disagree on Framber Valdez, right? He had that whole situation with his catcher in Houston, had the cross-up situation. We had reports that there were people very unhappy within the organization. I have a hard time seeing Framber Valdez going back to Houston at this point. I don't know. My guess is if something like that happened, you've probably had other instances where there's been some issues. I'm not sure. That's me speculating. I would imagine if there was like just this one-time thing, and yes, it was bad, but if people are very upset within the organization, that kind of makes me wonder if maybe there's been some other things that we just haven't heard about. I don't know. I'm not, that's just my guess. I'm speculating there. And we've also heard other reports too that, I believe it came from Bob Nightingale not too long ago, that there are teams that are no longer interested in Framber after that, right? It was a very poorly handled situation. I don't know what the heck happened. You've had catchers come out, former catchers, and they've talked about that, right? Kratz here on the Foul Territory Network, he's talked about it himself, saying, yeah, that was what the heck was Framber doing in that situation? So, the Red Sox, with how good the clubhouse was this past year, with how close guys got, that is a thing when it comes to front offices, right? You're looking at performance. Obviously, you're looking at all the analytics, the projections, right? But you're looking at chemistry. That is something that does come into play, right? How you never know how teams are going to mesh fully, but they do look into that as one of the factors, right? I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing the Red Sox going after him after something like that. I don't know. I mean, Cora obviously used to be with Houston, so maybe there could be something there. I'm not sure. I don't know. My guess would be no. Shane Bieber, here's the thing with Shane Bieber. The Red Sox, they were very interested in him last offseason. But with the Red Sox, do they want to go for more ceiling at this point? I've already mentioned the names. Joe Ryan, Dylan Cease, right? Shane Bieber, he'd be very good to add. And yes, they were interested in him, and they ended up getting Walker Buehler. But at this point, is Bieber the guy you want to go after? I'm sure he'll be on their list, but I see him more as like a fallback guy. So, again, if they do want to spend bigger, which I do think they're going to, I think they're going to go out there and make some moves. I don't think these guys would be at the top of the list personally. I think you're going to see other guys out there. That's just the way I see it. But overall, when it came to these predictions, again, I don't agree with the fact that they're just going to play it safe. I think they will in some ways. I don't think they're going to go just absolutely crazy and just shell off their whole farm. And, I don't think they're going to do that. But I don't think they're just going to sit around and go sign Merrill Kelly, bring back Bregman, Giolito. I don't think they're going to keep it at just that. I think you'll see a bit more than that. I think you'll see a lot more than that. Now, how far? Well, I'm not sure. But I think it's going to be a lot more than just keeping it safe. I don't think Christian Campbell's going to get traded unless it's something where you're looking at it, you're like, man, that's just too good to turn down, right? Like, could you maybe see Christian Campbell and say like a Joe Ryan kind of a trade? I don't know. I'm not sure what the Twins are going to be looking for. I would imagine they're going to look for pitching back in return. They could use more pitching within the organization. It comes down to preference. I don't know if Campbell would be a preference there. I don't know. I think he has more trade value than someone like Sandy Alcantara at this point, so I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. I don't know. I just don't see a scenario where Christian Campbell gets traded. That's just the way I think. But everybody, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap it up right there. That is all we have here today for Monster Territory, brought to you by Fox One. Go check it out. Go see what they got over there. Again, 7-day free trial. But everybody, I'm out of here. We'll be back here in a couple of days. Unless there is some kind of breaking news, I'll be here. But everybody, if you can, hit the like button on the way out. Subscribe if you're new. We're trying to get to 6K by opening day. I'll talk to you next time.